This just in, I'm buying the fucking tote. Yeah. Yeah, boys. Hey, girls. And I'm turning it into apartments. Jack Harlon Apartments. Fuck yeah. I'm good.
such a long way to go. I could see the fire, it was calling me home. And as they danced on the fire, came in from the cold. Come forth, my child, there's no need to fear. Take my hand, wherever you will. The words were spoken, but I knew what they meant. And that look in their eye, I saw my own death. Both the bodies were naked, and the things that we did, unholy and evil, we were drenched in sin. Come forth, my child, there's no need to fear. Take my hand, forever you will be. the middle, something so very wrong. What the meat was blowing, and my body it ached. It was then that I realized I made a mistake. Come forth, my child, there's no need to fear. Take my hand, forever you will be. As the light was fading, I made my escape. With the hellhounds chasing, there was no time to waste. Blue Mountain witches, tasting my blood. Blue Mountain witches, Blue Mountain love. Come forth, my child, there's no need to fear. Take my hand, forever you will be.
Welcome to the Roof Crew. I'm your host, Steve Mitchell, back for another big episode here in the realm. And joining me as always is my great mate over in Washington, D.C., Skull. How are you doing, mate?
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen in Cyberland. As you know, this is Skull, broadcasting from the past, present, and future in the Chamber of the Cosmos. Here with my good friend Steve Oz from Ozland. I'm an on-again, off-again DC bomb rock band Black Manta. I've been in the scene for 35 years. Also, I worked at the Smithsonian for 20 years, and I have incorporated my love and passion for history with my love and passion for music. As always, really excited to be here. And we have a very special guest with us today. It's a real honor to introduce a lyricist, member of Hawkwind and Blue Oyster Cult, and also creator of Elric and the Eternal Champion multiverse, Michael Moorcock. It's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
Well, I'm a big fan, really excited and honored to have you here. Have a lot of things to talk about. But just to start off, I mean, a lot of people might not know. If you want to give a little history of yourself, and just for the viewers out there that might not know who Michael Moorcock is.
Well, I've been writing for over 60 years, about 65, more than 65 years now. I started very young. I was in music as well as editing and writing since I was 16. Really, I was in a skiffle group, and we did a few demos which quite reasonably never made it, and we sort of gigged around, nothing big, just small gigs here and there. And then I really decided I had to choose between writing and music. And it was actually more comfortable to write than it was to sit in an old van going to some gig where two people might turn up if you were lucky, than it was doing that. So gradually, I stayed in music, but I really, it was really for my own pleasure for a while, and then gradually, I don't know quite how it happened. Well, of course, I think that Hawkwind was really the beginning of my, as it were, big public career with large audiences and all the rest of it. As it were. A proper rock and roll setup, and that's I went back into it really because I liked the band. I knew a lot of musicians by that time. I lived in Ladbroke Grove, and it's where an awful lot of particularly underground people hung out, and Ireland was there as well, and then later Virgin came in. So there was a lot of activity, musical activity. And as I said somewhere, if you didn't actually own a fretted instrument of some kind, people thought you were rather strange. So that's then Bob Calvert came to see me initially, and he said, you really ought to see this band that's going. It's it's a great. He wasn't really in it at that point. He was really doing what I did, lyrics and an occasional performance, so I went to see the band. I liked the band a lot. I really liked their air of spontaneity, the
Space rock.
Yeah, and I said at the time, it's like a mad crew of a spaceship who didn't quite know how everything worked, but were trying to see what happened if you press this button or that button. And it was really, I really did like them. I mean, I had no, I wasn't, at the time, the music press didn't. They thought it was a bunch of, crazed hippies who didn't know what they were doing. But I didn't feel like that. And also they were local, and they were what we used to call a people's band. I mean, I knew quite a lot of people saying the Pink Fairies and Pretty Things and various
Deviants.
bands of that kind. Yeah. And a lot of people just lived in that area, people from other bands. And so I got to know a lot of people, but I wasn't performing. I still wasn't. I was still doing my magazine New Worlds, which was a kind of, I suppose you'd call it, well, it started the new wave. I mean, the so-called new wave in science fiction. And we just kind of threw out everything, all the old stuff, and brought in different formats for the magazine itself, as well as different kinds of stories and so on. But we were probably of that generation which was into rock and roll, the first generation, and so it reflected a lot of what was going on in the popular arts, if you like.
Well, you said something really interesting. If we can go back a little bit, a lot of people might not know what a skiffle band is. Do you remember the name of the band?
Well, it varied, but we called ourselves the Greenhorns, which was exactly what we were. We all had kind of Western style hats and stuff like that. I mean, it was a very early country rock band, I suppose you'd call it. But I was very fond of Woody Guthrie. I mean, he was a hero of mine. And Woody Guthrie, I corresponded with Woody Guthrie, and which I was I'm very proud of having had that contact. And it was, protest music was involved in it too, and sort of musical satire, the usual stuff that you tended to get, say, about 10 years later in country rock, in bands like oh God, I'm terrible at names.
Jimmy Page was famously in a skiffle band, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, everybody was. I mean, that's where everybody started. I mean, Keith was in a skiffle group. Everybody who had any kind of ambition in music or wanting to express themselves in music got into a skiffle group, because it was something that the punks, for instance, were admiring of. I mean, we had a history. Those of us who'd been in skiffle groups, for instance, there was a skiffle group called the oh God, what were they called? It's actually a name for a junkie. I can't remember the name of the band now. But they turned into Cliff Richard's backing group, which then became I don't know, I'm sorry about this. I'm really,
The
really bad
Shadows?
at names. No, not the Shadows, but something like that. It's a name like that. They did a kind of science fictiony, lots of sort of twang and long riffs in, but they were a kind of early start, so that the bands that came late, a little bit later, tended to give I don't know, respect to that, to those people. So a lot of us did start like that, and I was really surprised a few years ago. I think it was, I mean, many years ago now, to find that a lot of the rock bands of say the 60s and 70s were, you know, had an understanding of that history, and sort of and were kind of gave me sort of a lot more credit in the in the rock and roll world, if you like. So Dave Brock of Hawkwind was in the skiffle group. I don't quite a lot of other people were had been in skiffle groups before they started. Dave started as a you know, just on the streets playing the theatre cues for, you know, and stuff like that. And again, that's how a lot of people, you know, started off and got their experience. But I knew a lot of the blues people, the people that are associated, say, with Eric Clapton, and the people who came out of playing British blues. I didn't actually know the Stones. I didn't know any of them really, except I knew Charlie a little bit, but from a long time before the Stones. But Alex Corner was one of the sort of great godfathers of British blues, and he was somebody that and almost everybody who was in a band associated with them, like, say, the guys in Cream, and that sort of kind of band. They were all they all started on the British blues scene, and that's what
along
I
with
got into.
John Mayall too.
Yeah, oh, John Mayall, absolutely, John Mayall, yeah. And I mean, I love John Mayall anyway. I mean, there used to be a club called the Flamingo. I've just been writing about it. I'm sort of writing a book that's half memoir and half fiction, so people can't tell me I'm telling lies. Because and John Mayall used to go to this club too, but they were organ-based bands mostly, doing organ-based blues-based music. Zoot Money, God, again, I've forgotten his name. So Georgie Fame, who was very successful at the time. Long John Baldry, who, as it were, discovered Elton John, and I knew him pretty well, and he was the only person around who was taller than I was, and it was I kind of lived in awe of John. He was a very nice bloke, very generous bloke. Got a lot of people into the business one way or another, and so that's how Dave Brock, again, you know, and quite a lot of the heavy metal people started off as blues players, and you know, and then slowly developed their own styles. So yeah, that was the music scene, and which I stayed within for quite a long time. The music press, when I started performing with Hawkwind, treated me as if I was some kind of parvenu who'd sort of come in from, you know, because I was very sick. I mean, almost, it seemed to me almost the whole of the rock and roll world started reading my books when I was doing Elric and Hawkmoon and
Poet
so on.
wizard.
So everyone,
You're like a poet
so
and a wizard.
yeah, well, it was a strange thing, but you know, I'd go to a gig and you know there'd be another group and we would talk. I'd start talking, and they'd say, "Yeah, I really like your books, man," and stuff like that. And so it was a great entry into into that world. But the press itself at the time saw Hawkwind as a kind of rabble who you know who like a 3-chord rabble, and saw me as a sort of a bit of a poser, you know, who was successful as a writer, and they'd then come in, you know, somehow come in to perform with a rock and roll band. But what they didn't know is I'd been doing it all along, you know, and so it was very easy for me. I've never had stage fright. You know, I've always loved being on stage. I love I love audiences, big or small. But you know, I like that whole feel. So it's never been a problem. It was never a problem for me to when Dave Brock asked me to perform with them, just to do it.
Well, I have so this was the album here,
Yeah,
Warriors
yeah,
on the Edge of
yeah,
Time.
yeah. which got a you know which got gold records and stuff, and I'm probably the only sort of well-known writer, as it were, who has a gold record,
Right,
which was
that's awesome.
well, it sort of was, but because we were also a people's band and identified with people, it was a bit of an embarrassment to get a commercial award from the music business. So it wasn't entirely, it was something
you lose your street cred.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd wonder I wondered what to do with it when I got it. Also, after I got it, I realized how much money the management hadn't been paying us. It's a sort of because you don't think about it, and then you suddenly think, hang on, you had to sell a lot of records to get this, and so but it didn't matter. I mean, I never did it. I mean, money was never a big thing with me, unless as long as I could pay for my family and all the rest of it.
Right.
But it was a sort of a natural development for me. I just finished doing the magazine. I felt that an editor could only supply dynamic for so many years, and then started to get stale, and you needed other people to come in and take over and do what they wanted to do. So I'd pretty much given up the magazine to other people, and it was at that point that Dave asked me to really to do what Robert had just started to do. But Robert was unstable, it's not a secret, and was in the loony bin at the time. So I went to see Robert and assured him that his job was secure. That as soon as he wanted to come back to work, I'd fade out, and that was pretty much the relationship that I had with Hawkwind. When Robert couldn't do the gig, I'd do it instead, and of course I was performing a lot of my own work as well, and supplying I don't know what you call them, really, plot lines for
I wanted to show you something. I have a melody maker here. Do you recognize who that is on stage?
I think so. It looks like is that oh God, what's her name?
It's Stacia.
Yeah, Stacia, of course. Yeah,
I have an old
love
melody
Stacia.
maker with her on.
Yeah. I was very fond of Stacia. She was a very, very nice, sweet person, and still is. I mean, and people used to think of her as a bit of a sex symbol, but she was actually quite vulnerable and sweet. So she was a genuine hippie, really. She took her clothes off not because there was some old man with drooling in the corner, as it were, but because at that time, everybody,
to be
almost
free.
everybody. Yeah, exactly. The way you got it frequently, you got it places like Glastonbury. You know, you'd get people just stripping off, men and women, and dancing, and that's how Stacia started. And of course, we had Lemmy as well. I mean, Lemmy was a good friend of mine, and
I'm a huge Lemmy fan. Huge Lemmy fan.
yeah, me too. I mean, he was a nice guy. I mean, I really loved Lemmy. I was very sorry he died. But I know him particularly because the band needed a new bass player, and they just sort of asked around if they knew any bass players, and I went with a guy called John Trucks, who's a friend of mine who knew this bass player, and we went along to the rehearsal or the audition to see, you know, this guy was going to audition for bass player. But by the time we got there, Lemmy was already there, and Lemmy had already got the job. I mean, there was no, so I feel sorry for the guy that you know, that didn't get the job. But I was very pleased that Lemmy did get it, and we were friends since then. Partly because Lemmy had the completely mistaken notion that I had a big source of speed, which I didn't. I mean, my source of speed was my mother-in-law, who'd given me this stuff because she didn't want it, you know, didn't know what it was, and said, you know, you can have it. And
That sounds like Lemmy.
Yeah, right. But and also, you know, we lived in the same and drank in the same pubs, mostly the Princess Alexandra. We kind of moved out of various pubs as fans discovered where we were drinking, and we never minded drinking with fans, but it would become overwhelming. So you couldn't actually just, you know, sit quietly and have a drink. So we kind of moved around in different pubs, and I think Princess Alexandra was about the last place we were going in that area, which is on Portobello Road. It had a row of stalls one side and a row of shops and pubs the other side of the little street. I don't know if you know it, but it's a very narrow, winding street, long one, but narrow. And across the street from the Princess Alexandra was a stall that sold Nazi memorabilia, which I have to say, I mean, I remember this. I didn't know it was Nazi stuff when I first looked at it, and I found it attractive. I thought, you know, this is nice stuff. Then I realized, you know, all these things had swastikas on the hilt and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure that's where, I never asked him, but I'm pretty sure that's where Lemmy started to pick up all his Nazi stuff, because he certainly wasn't a Nazi in any.
No. It was just all about shock value and.
Well, it wasn't even that. He was attracted to it because of the style, and I must admit, the Nazis had a great sense of style. I think that's why they beat the communists at the time. You know,
Yeah.
Hitler had been to art school.
The bad guys always had the best outfits, right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Well, I wanted to say that maybe fast forward a little bit, just for me personally, from my generation, I was introduced to you and Elric, your creation, through this book, The Deities and Demigods. I was just a young kid. Yeah. Learning this game. You know, I'm just going to show it real quick. The
Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah,
you can see here.
That's right. Yeah, that's the book, the first one, wasn't it? They didn't. The later ones didn't have that in it, because what happened was I actually gave the rights to the game to I've forgotten the guy's name. I knew him fairly well, but anyway, the guy started Dungeons and Dragons, and he said,
Gary Gygax.
Gary Gygax, and he said, you know, could he use the mythology of Elric? And I said, sure. I mean, there was no financial or copyright or any sort of paperwork done at all. I just said, yeah, go ahead. And Fritz Leiber, who wrote the Grey Mouser series, which is another very, very good sword and sorcery series, he said the same thing. You know, that Gary asked him, and he said, "Sure, you can use my stuff." And then another guy came along. The company was Chaosium, and again, I can't quite remember his name. And he said, you know, can I use these characters? I said, sure, go ahead. As did Fritz. We both did. So we neither of us asked for any money or any kind of contract or anything. We just in those days, it was a relatively small community, and you had that sense of, you know, of I don't know what you call it, brotherhood, or some kind of, yeah. And then Chaosium sued or threatened to sue. They never, I don't think it ever got to court, but they sued Dungeons and Dragons because they were using the rights, using the Mel Nibanayan stuff and Fritz's stuff, and we, I mean, I didn't want anything to do with it because that wasn't what I'd originally said it was okay for. So I just sort of let them sort it out between them, and in the end, Gary gave up and let the Chaosium guy take over, and so Chaosium then started to do an actual Elric game, which again, right, and that one was done, sort of through my agent. It wasn't, I didn't actually have much to do with it because I didn't want any of, I didn't want to get involved in all of the crap around copyrights and so on. Unfortunately, the guy doing Chaosium, Charlie something, he was enthusiastic, and my agent got I think $300 or something from him for rights, but that was all the money ever paid, and he actually, he actually broke the contract by not paying for any of the books or any of the other stuff he was supposed to pay for. So my agent got onto it. I mean, and then of course Chaosium started to go downhill anyway, because although I think Charlie was probably a nice guy and an enthusiast, but he really had no business sense at all. And so, I mean, Chaosium was well named. I mean, it turned into chaos, and eventually they collapsed. They're building up again now, and I think they're trying to make good all of the mistakes that were made originally, because Charlie had me and he had Lovecraft as well. And again, there was very little paperwork or anything else, and he didn't. It wasn't the world. Well, the world now is essentially all this stuff has gone corporate anyway, and the used to get one piece of paper, as a deal. Everything was down on that single sheet of paper, probably about half a sheet of paper, and you signed it, and that was that. Now you get contracts, about that thick, and they go into every detail, and agents argue over it for months, and eventually, something happens. But in those days, I mean, there was still that sense of just being a family of people.
For sure. I mean, but along with Tolkien, you're considered one of the original, or probably one of the greatest fantasy authors of all time. I mean, you've influenced an entire generation, like you said, of fantasy writers and film and comics and even role-playing games for like you said, over 60 years now.
Yeah, true, but I've also done a lot of other stuff, and I tend to be more interested in the work that I'm doing at the time than you know, what I did back then, as it were. Although, I mean, ironically, I still make most of my money from Elric and the fantasy stuff. There's a really incredibly good French series that started a little while ago. That's a comic series that's really good, and another sort of Elric set. Elric sets appear to be the fashion at the moment, and they're appearing all over America and Germany and France and everywhere else. And there's another game. I can't remember their name either. It's Titan, not Titan. And they've got an Elric game that they launched. And there are two, I think, a couple of other Elric games and another video game that's in the works. You know, nice goblet. All I've got is a.
Oh, thank you. It was a gift. It's my magic goblet.
Yeah, well, we all need a magic goblet. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the games, really. I mean, I'm still not. I still don't play games. I've never played games. I mean, except poker, which my first wife made me stop after my second child was born, because I stayed up all night playing poker, and had to announce to her as the baby was born, the day the baby was born, that I'd lost all the money for the electricity bill and the phone bill and so on during that night.
Right.
So I gave up poker. And I really, it was. I mean, I'm a better poker player than it sounds, but I'd just gone on playing. I mean, I was well ahead a lot of the time, and then gradually, you know, I just kept going because I wanted to stay up. I was by the phone waiting to see when the baby was going to be born, but she didn't quite see it that way. So, you know, so no more poker ever for me.
Well, I just wanted to say there is. I talked to Jim Kirkland from Dreaming City, and we were talking about the best way to approach reading the Eternal Champion series. And so we kind of sat down. I know that there's many books out there, but we kind of boiled it down to like, I have like my entire pile here. I can barely lift it up, but it's like my pile of 22. These are all Robert Gould covers.
Yeah.
And you know, these covers are the Robert Gould covers.
Yeah.
And I just recently read all of those. So
I changed publishers and insisted on Robert Gould as the artist when I changed publishers at that time. I think it was the 80s. It must have been. And I've always liked that set. I mean, because they've got such a nice uniformity, apart from the fact that he's a very good artist. And the trouble was with those is that they started publishing everything with the same kind of covers. So that the science fiction that I did, which was not at all like the fantasy, started looking the same. So it was a strange period, really, where I felt that I'd started something I couldn't stop. Not that I loved Robert's covers. I still like Robert's work, and of course it still appears in different forms. But it came to the point where I was beginning to think, that this poor bastard, how's he going to do another cover different from the last cover he did, and so on. But right. That was, I think, Ace Berkeley who did that set, and we got on very well. I mean, it did very well, but I had a patch where in America, not so much in France and England, where I was living then, but in America where the at that period things started to fade out for me. I mean, or rather, my if you like, my star began to descend, in fantasy, and so for a while there weren't, after that set, there were not many Elric books coming out, except for, and I oh, that's right, it was something I wanted. It wasn't just fate. I wanted to do a set of books that gave the reader a way into the series, so that they could read all the books, or all the relevant books anyway, in some sort of order, because people were asking me that all the time. So there was a game company called White Wolf who based their name on Elric, and nice couple of brothers actually. I think they may both be dead now. I know they were sick, but they did very well with a game, not an Elric game, but another game, and they did so well they wanted to start publishing fantasy as well in book form. So I already had a deal set up in England. I'd managed to get, well, I hadn't done it really deliberately, but when Robert Maxwell took over a firm, Maxwell's the big, well, the owner of Fox News, put it that way. I mean, we should give some idea of his political bent. And I didn't really want to be published by Maxwell. He'd done a couple of nasty tricks on minor employees as well. So I just didn't want to be associated with that. So I went to the firm and I said, I didn't really have any power to do it, but I said, I want all my books back, you know. And we talked about it a bit, and they accepted it, because they were pretty miserable themselves about the takeover. So I found myself on the pavement, you know, outside the publisher's office, as it were, with two large suitcases of books that I hadn't got anyone to publish. But then a new publisher started, with a guy called Anthony Cheetham, who was a great science fiction fan anyway, and had done science fiction with other publishers that he'd worked for, but he started Orion Publishing. So I went to him and I said, you know, would you like to do this as a series of large hardbacks, with each one having, of course, not everyone could have. The Elric stories, for instance, had to have 2 volumes at least, and so on, and the Coram stories too. I'm not sure about the Hawk, and the Hawk Moon. But I said, you know, basically with one volume per set. And he said, fine, you know. But what I didn't realize as well, this is what happened. What I didn't realize was that by selling them as single volumes in one big omnibus, at that time, I was actually cutting my own royalties by sometimes by 2/3. So I'd actually kind of messed up financially, which didn't bother me much. That, you know, but it's I could see a sort of a downward curve in income rather than anything else, because that's the only way really you can tell what's happening. And it was because I'd done these big, thick hardbacks with White Wolf and Orion, and again, I didn't mind, because I've always felt in control of my own publishing, as it were. It's not, it's just because I started off as an editor and working for a publisher and then publishing New Worlds, I had a sense of having that control, which most authors don't have. So I had planned, all these plans were plans that I'd put together at that time. And so I lived with it. My agent was saying, you know, oy vey, as it were, you know, what the hell are you doing? You know, you're losing us money. But I didn't really care, because it did give people a chance to, you know, just to read the books in order. And after that, I did a deal with Del Rey, but between that time, White Wolf went down. I mean, they really overextended their book publishing, which was based on their game publishing, And when the game started to, you know what games are like. They depend upon the public's constant interest, and there's only about 5 or 6 that sell at any one time, but not for Christmas or whenever. And so their vast wealth sort of started to disappear, and they became a bit crazy. And the books they never got the books out into the paperback editions they were meant to do finally. So it meant I had no mass market audience. And during that period, that's when my I don't know what, my fame in the United States actually sort of disappeared. It's a strange feeling when that happens, when you've kind of been used to waiters saying, "Oh, are you the Michael Moorcock?" when you go in with credit card, and they stop doing that, and you have this distinct sense of being back to normal, really, which I didn't mind. Because it always embarrassed me a bit. So it wasn't something but it's certainly a reality. And then I sold the Elric books to Del Rey, sorry. And those were the books. I published them in the order in which they'd been written, rather than the internal order of the series. And that started to bring sort of Elric back into public view, as it were. And then the comics did a great deal to help too. And who else did a game? Begins with an M, and I can't remember their name either. Mongoose. They did an Elric game. So in a sense, I've always depended on games, games in particular, and comics, but comics slightly more recently, to stimulate the interest in the books. And luckily for me, both things started happening around the same time. So my star started to go up again. As I said, it's a long story, which I won't tell now. But I've always felt that my career has gone, in cycles. It's sort of boom or bust, boom or bust, boom or bust. And it's partly because of I'm just not really interested in commercial, in the commercial side of. I mean, obviously, I have to be. And I have to earn a living and so on. But it's always been more interesting for me, to do something interesting or get something out that people might.
Well, yeah,
like.
you have that, like you said, that rebellious spirit, that kind of rock and roll spirit about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like, I have these spirit burning albums, and that's because you said you love music, and you have a passion about that, and
I did another record called done through Cleopatra, called live at the Temporal Cafe, I think it's called.
And so there's going to be a third one, right?
There is, yeah.
Okay. And you're currently working with Al Bouchard. I mean, is there a possibility that you worked with BOC in the past? There's a possibility that you might work with those guys one day, lyrically.
Oh yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, I've known Eric for years and years.
I just wanted to throw these on the screen real quick.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Mirrors and Cultosaurus Erectus.
Absolutely, yeah. And I really like the band. I didn't have the same relationship with it as I had with Hawkwind, which was, of course, I was performing much more with Hawkwind, and I'd perform my own material. So, but it's a sort of a similar friendship Blue Oyster Cult. With Lemmy, for that matter. I mean, you know, although I didn't ever work with Lemmy. But yeah, but the one with Cleopatra is just me. I mean, or rather, I mean, it's a band, of course, but it's just me and my concept, my singing all the way through. And I'm just about to do another record with Cleopatra through Alan Davey, who is the Hawkwind drummer. We put on or I didn't put it on, Matt.
Oh, he was Alan Davey. He was on this album, right?
Yeah,
the bass player.
Yeah. He played with the band for quite. Yeah, I mean, he was the drummer with Hawkwind for quite a long time. But he lives
The
in
Chronicles
California
of the Black
now.
Sword.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he lives in California now, and as well as doing his own stuff, he produces stuff mainly for Cleopatra Records, who are another Californian record company. And what I'm doing, well, it's coming up now, probably I'll start it next month, is I'm going to do I can't remember how many songs, about 10 redo songs, not just by me, but also by Bob Calvert, which I'm very glad to do, because I was on two of Bob's records, playing banjo as well as mandolin and guitar, but only singing backing vocals. He did, of course, the main vocals, and there's some of his songs which I like so much that I've always wanted to sing them. So when Alan proposed this, I went for it very, very, very quickly. And of course, there is the other Spirits Burning record coming. So I'll be doing quite a lot of record stuff in the next year, I suppose, over the next year.
Wow!
And I'm looking forward to it. It's a bit easier than, well, it is for me anyway, a bit easier than typing.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. I mean, have you talked to Alan or Al Bouchard or Eric Bloom about possibly doing some new lyrics for them?
No, I mean, it never really came up. I lost touch with Eric. I'm not quite sure how. Probably because of my moving around a lot, you know, and also when I got to Texas, which is where I am now, I immediately got an autoimmune disease, and I'm sure it was all the fresh air. You know, I moved from London to the Texas countryside, and it destroyed me. It was horrible.
Too much fresh air.
Yeah, and it really did me in. And so I mean, that was pretty bad. I mean, I was pretty sick. So for quite a long time, I wasn't doing anything much. I broke with Hawkwind because Nick was a close friend of mine by that time, and when Dave started, Dave is a bit of a politician, I suppose. I mean, he's very good at managing the band. He's been very good at keeping that music under control. You know, he can really. It's like he's now got like a huge engine which he can make work. So I have every respect for his musicianship, but not so much for his personal relationship. And Nick was a bit irritating. He would come in, you know, at the wrong. Somebody's doing a solo. Nick would suddenly come in with a saxophone riff or a flute riff or something like that.
Right.
And I know how irritating it could be. I mean, it's happened to me. But I mean, what Nick was doing. But I just didn't like the way that Dave kicked him out. To me, Nick was the spirit of Hawkwind. He was sort of what Hawkwind was from the very beginning, a free spirit. and always was like that. But it could be irritating for people trying to run a career. I could see that, because Nick and I were both the same. We weren't really that interested in having commercial music careers. We still felt much more in touch with the audience, say, than with the corporation. And when Dave went to the dark side, which essentially meant kicking out an awful lot of people, and even stopping fans from doing stuff and all of that, I just couldn't take it anymore, and quietly left the band. I mean, I didn't make any announcement. I didn't say it to anybody. I just didn't do any more gigs or do any more writing, and that was it. With that,
was that in the late 70s? When was that exactly?
Well, it was in it was in the 80s. I think the early 80s when that started to happen badly. And it's gone on from there. I mean, now Portland are playing, the Albert Hall and the London Palladium and all these really, really big gigs. And I'm sure they're making considerably more money than they were making. But it doesn't suit me really to do that. I mean, again, it means their management's changed, so their management's much harder. It's become it's not what the likes of me and Lemmy, say, and Nick were really about. I mean, if once we just weren't interested in doing what the suits suggested, I think is probably what it is. And it's I mean, I don't like to make too much of it, because there's a lot of sentimental bullshit about being fond of the people and not interested in the in the commercial aspects and so on. But that was why I did it. And I do just love audiences, and I like pleasing an audience, as it were. So to get the feedback. I remember one time I couldn't get in. I wasn't allowed into the backstage. It was Liverpool Stadium, I think, and I knocked on the door, and they had this sort of guard standing there, and I said, I'm with the band. He said, yeah, I've heard that before, mate, and then he wouldn't let me in. So I went round to the front, and where all the audience was waiting, to go in, and they said, oh, great, you're going to be on tonight. I said, yeah, I'm going to be on tonight. And I said, unfortunately, I can't remember any of the words. And they said, oh, don't worry about that. We know all the words. We'll sing them for you. And that's the first time I realized that or rather, it became concrete, that's what you get. I mean, you're really, there really is a rapport between yourself and the audience. And I would rather identify with that than with anything, than with just putting on a big show, or well, any of that stuff. I have nothing against people like I don't know, the Rolling Stones. I have nothing against them doing that, but it's not really what I do it for. I really do it for the pleasure of it. Anyway.
I did want to mention, this is a book that I worked with this Urish's Horde with Jim Kirkland from Dreaming City. And we're currently working on a couple projects together. We're working on Hobbstown Horror, and Mark Jackson, who actually worked with White Wolf, and he's worked on some of those games back in the 90s. I'm working on a book with him about Percival, and it's just cool that this was, he basically put this together about everything that's out there about Elric, and there was a couple interview, and so a picture of him and you together at Dragon Con back in the early 90s.
Yeah. I used to go to Dragon Con when it first started, and when it was really quite a small convention, and then the next, I went for several years, and then one year it was just this vast. It was so big, with special sections for games, special sections for books, and all that. That it rather put me off. I must say, it was just too big for me, and it meant that I couldn't get time with people that I wanted to meet there. Because that was usually the only place I could meet and talk with fans. And the bigger it gets, this happened in England too. The bigger it gets, the less you can do that, because you're sitting there trying to talk to some guy, who's had a question or wanted to ask something for 20 years, and he's finally got the chance, and you're sitting there with him.
Sure.
And then somebody else comes along and sort of butts in with not always with a very intelligent question, as it were, or whatever. So I didn't really like doing that. And also, I'm 80. I'm coming on. I'll be 84 next month. So
well, happy birthday.
I just have. Thank you. But I have to conserve my energy really as much as I can. So I've really stopped doing conventions, usually unless they're very, very local. And I haven't done an awful lot in the last 10 years. Really, I've done a few in France, a few in Italy, and a few here. But I'm also, I tend to be away in France for half the year, and most of that time the conventions, like there's a local one in Austin, which is one of the reasons I decided to move to Austin at the time. But I haven't been to it for years now because I'm in Paris during the period when it's on. So it's an aspect that's just to a degree has been made up for by Zoom and interviews like this one, where you can just chat and talk to people.
Well, I know that Linda has us blocked off for an hour, but we would love to have you back and have a part 2, part 3.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've got I can go on forever. She just knows, and this is true, that when I'm talking and I'm zooming, I'm enjoying it, or often, most of the time enjoying it, and but then I'm pretty wiped out for the rest of the day. So she's tended to get strict about how long I do these interviews, but I very much enjoy doing them. So I'd be happy to do another one. As you say, do a series.
Yeah, I only got through half of my questions. Yeah, we can do a series of these and go back and
I haven't even touched on the books I've got yet.
Steve has his own pile.
Yeah. That's actually the only thing wrong with not doing live conventions or live gigs of some kind is that I can't sign the books that people want me to sign. But I can say this, that I think my post office box is pretty well known, and all you have to do is send me a stamped addressed envelope, and I've got labels specially done, most of them Elric, for that I can sign. If anybody ever wants anything signed, I can sign these labels and send them back to them. I would prefer stamped addressed envelopes because these days postage, it costs you about half your income if you're going to start sending stuff back all the time.
Yeah, especially if you need a box.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, again, it's a lot. It's not cheaper for everybody if I do these. I pity I haven't got one to show you, but I just did a bunch. I think yesterday, and I'm very happy to do that if people want signatures.
Did you have any last words for your fans out there?
Well, keep listening and keep writing. Keep reading. Writing too if you write it. I'm always open to fans, and glad to talk to them, and glad to hear from them. So and there is a Facebook page, or there's several Facebook pages, but only one or two have my name on them. My main Facebook page is one of my characters, which Linda put on, Buggly Otherly, who is a character from a sort of absurdist series of science fiction books I do. And he's a captain in of a ship called I don't know, I can't remember the name. Anyway, they're all pretty they're comedies. So Buggly Otherly is the main page for Facebook, but there's also friends of Michael Moorcock, and there's actually a music page called The Deep Fix, after my band. So there's plenty of places if people do want to write or get books signed that I can do. I'm happy to do them.
Okay,
and
well,
I'll be happy to see you again.
Well, this is a very special interview, and I'm very, very happy to do this. I just have one last thing to say. I wanted to end the show by saying that I dedicate this show to a lot of my old friends at RPG Central, Knights of the Prime Material Plane, the Dreaming City Fellowship, and of course my little sister Lisa. And one final thing I want to say is, remember, look to the stars, carry that torch of enlightenment, and strive to be a disciple of rock and roll and the Brotherhood of Orpheus.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right on.
Good for you.